much better. What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. Now today, we're going to be talking about the Sony A7S III and maybe if it's the best video camera of 2020. Now let's get into it. So like everything else, we're going to start with the specs. The Sony A7S III shoots full frame, 4K up to 120 frames per second, 1080 up to 240 frames per second, 10-bit 422, 15 stops of dynamic range, S-tone colors, low light, no record limit, dual card slots, IBIS, 12 megapixel camera, 16-bit raw video output up to 60 frames per second. And the price of this camera is $3,500. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and say this. When it comes to mirrorless cameras, the A7S III may be the closest thing that we have to a full-fledged cinema camera. So like you heard in the spec, it does shoot 12 megapixel, but when it comes to higher end cinema cameras like the Reds, like the Aries, they have lower megapixel count because instead of worrying about quantity, they're more worried about the quality of those pixels. And they use those pixels to stretch them even more to get a better image out of it. So who is this camera competing with? It's competing with Canon's R5 and Panasonic's S1H. So at the beginning of the year, Canon came out swinging. They announced their long-awaited Canon 1DX Mark III, which is a beast of a camera. But then, shortly after that, they announced the Canon R5 and the Canon R6. And with this announcement, they forgot that even the 1DX existed. And this is why. Because the R5 shoots 8K. Comes to find out that a serious issue with the R5 is its overheating. And I don't mean like, it's overheat after you shoot 1 hour. No, a lot of people are saying that this camera will start to overheat as soon as they turn it on, and it will only give them about 5 to 6 minutes of recording time in 8K. So when I was watching some of these reviews, I would comment and tell the bigger YouTubers like, hey, this R5 overheating will be a bigger issue. And at first they were saying like, nah, it'll be okay, we'll be able to work around it, this and that, this and that. But then like a week or so later, they came back and saying, oh, the overheating is a bigger problem than we thought. And it almost made the camera unusable in professional settings. And a few people even canceled their order. Now, after all the overheating issues, a lot of people are still saying that Canon had the best camera of the year. But then Sony saw that and said, hold my sake. And then they released the Sony A7S III, which is a beast of a camera. I saw the reviews, I saw the image quality, and this camera looked amazing. It looked like you're shooting on a full-fledged cinema camera. And I say this because it has that 12 megapixel sensor, and it used those S-tone colors that Sony used in their cinema cameras. And just the image it can produce with just those two codecs and hardware alone is amazing. Now the big question in the room is, does the Sony A7S III overheat? Yes it does, but not as much as the R5 in as many cases. And that right there is a plus. Now comparing that to the Lumen S1H, where it actually has a built-in fan to actually dissipate some of that heat, it may be falling short, but it's what it is. And also one thing that I found impressive in the Sony, that just like my Fuji X-T3, you can actually go back and forth between 8-bit codec and 10-bit codec. In the Canon R5, you can't. It's either one or the other, because if you don't shoot in 10-bit, you can't have access to C-Log. Okay, so one more thing you have to worry about when you're buying these cameras. Okay, now since the Canon does shoot 8K, your computer will need to be able to actually handle that codec and those files, because those files will be massive. If your computer can't handle 8K, matter of fact, if your computer can barely handle 4K, you should not be looking to get in the R5, because if you do, you'll have to spend literally almost $10,000 plus on a computer that can actually handle that codec. Now the Sony A7S III does shoot in 16-bit raw codec, but it does it in 4K, which may give your computer a little bit of an easier time editing this footage. Yes, you will have to use proxies. If you use DaVinci Resolve, you will have to use optimized media. Now myself, I usually like to transcode all my footage into ProRes 422 HQ before I start editing, because for some reason DaVinci Resolve don't like to play movie files, but that's okay. So if I had to choose between the R5 and the Sony A7S III for my full frame video option, I would choose the Sony A7S III. And the reason is because it will already fit into my workflow. Now I know it does 16-bit raw codec, but a lot of times I will probably just be using the S-Log footage out of that camera. So if I was to buy the Canon R5, I would have to spend between $10,000 to $20,000 on a brand new computer that can edit those files. And I can't justify spending almost $30,000 diving into a brand new ecosystem just for 8K. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, but before you go, what I want you to do is smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when I upload new content. Hope you have a good day. Peace.